really your vision in landing automotive manufacturing here in the volunteer state? You know, at the time, nobody really knew what your thoughts were or the impact that it would really have on Tennessee. It's really been one of your greatest legacies, and it's set a precedent in Tennessee as us being really identified across the nation as a top-tier state for manufacturing, and especially automotive manufacturing. It's set the tone where so many are following us, and we've shown that automotive manufacturing can provide significant economic growth, and that economic growth has fueled record investments in education, our healthcare, and it's allowed Tennesseans' tax burden to be low. So we don't in any way want to discount just the tremendous effort that you've had with automotive manufacturing, and we recognize that. Before I turn it over, I'm going to first turn over to Jeff Aiken with the Tennessee Farm Bureau. But Senator, I do want to, on behalf of the Tennessee Chamber and our Board of Directors, we're going to present you with our Champion of Commerce Award. The Champion of Commerce, when we go back and look, it's our highest award ever. We've not ever given it to a federal candidate. So you'll be the first person sitting United States Senator to ever receive the Champion of Commerce Award. It's elected by our Board of Directors. So we're very happy to award you that today. I do want to thank Vanderbilt University, one of our sponsors here. And I will turn it over. Mr. Jeff Aiken, do you have a few words?
Thank you, Bradley, and good morning, Senator Alexander and everyone else. It's a little bittersweet here today, no doubt. To think that it all started with a red plaid shirt and a walk across Tennessee, and many would say that that's the best strategy ever. I'm not sure, sir, that it was a strategy. I think you just wanted to connect with people, and for 40 years, I think you've been the ultimate statesman with everything that all the accomplishments that Bradley just mentioned that you have accomplished within Tennessee, and the service that you've provided to Tennessee is unbelievable. But even with all of those accolades, you still remember the people that you met 40 years ago on that trip across Tennessee, many of them farmers and rural Tennesseans, and you throughout that 40 years have maintained those relationships and have tried to provide good representation to each and every one. And I think that is a testament to your service. I think it's a testament to your character, and we at the Tennessee Farm Bureau are eternally grateful for what you've meant to our organization and our membership. And we wish you well in retirement, but no doubt we'll miss you and your service. So thank you, sir. With that, I'll turn it over to Evan Freeman.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hello, Senator. Again, I'm Evan Freeman, Director of Government Relations for EPB in Chattanooga. Senator, it's a pleasure to be able to make a few comments today, and it's even more a pleasure to have worked for you for over a decade. You've been an era of Tennessee history from Mountain City to Memphis. You're woven into the fabric of what makes Tennessee great. As governor, as Bradley's brought up, you recruited the auto industry that's still growing today. You built a roads program that literally paved the way for thousands of jobs across the state of Tennessee. And with your leadership and stewardship, we have those great roads with zero road debt to this day. As Senator, you passed clean air legislation and environmental legislation that has kept Tennessee beautiful and kept our air clean, making Tennessee very attractive for manufacturers to come visit. You passed legislation that took power from the federal government and placed education in the hands of the state to make the best decisions and allow us locally to build education programs and workforce programs that make sense for Tennessee. And of course, you passed the Songwriters Fairness legislation to allow such a very important industry be preserved in our state and with the songwriters. But of all those accomplishments, if I could just make a personal note, the biggest thing and the most impactful accomplishment to me is seeing you as a husband, a father, and a grandfather, and how important family was to you, and seeing you interact with your family. That's how you balanced and the sacrifices that you made to make sure that other Tennesseans have a good life and a chance at that opportunity, and really putting yourself out there for us for so long. Really appreciate that, and really a pleasure to see you. So thank you, Senator.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I'd like to pass it over to Mark Brayton, Senior Vice President at Mercury Public Strategies.
Thanks, Evan, and Senator. Always good to be with you. I had the distinct honor of running your last campaign back in 2014, and when I started that campaign, I had a longtime supporter of yours tell me, Mark, now that you're working for Senator Alexander, even when you're off the payroll, you're never going to be off the clock. And I've been honored to work with you and continue to stay on the clock to support you in the office to move our country and our state in a positive direction. So, it's humbling to be asked to honor you and say a few words. And, when I think back to, the legacy you leave, not just policy, but to echo Evan's comments about your family, I'm sure Honey and the kids and the grandkids are going to be happy to have you around more. But our country and our state's going to miss your leadership and your voice in the arena. And generations of Tennesseans have really learned how to find the good and praise it. And those words never ring truer as we're a week away from the election. We need to find more good and praise it more, rather than the current conversations we're having in political discourse. So I just say congratulations on a wonderful career. I can't wait to see what you do next. Ambassador Hagerty has big hiking boots to fill in that seat, and I'm honored to play a little part in helping you serve our country and our state in such a way that your legacy will carry on for many years and many generations to come. Not just your service, but also in the Little Plaid book. And I think Mr. Aiken can attest. The best advice is to walk in the front of the Mill Day Parade, not in the back. So thank you, Senator Alexander, and appreciate all you've done for our state and our country.
Thanks, Mark.
Senator Alexander, I hope we haven't made you blush too much, but we will turn over to you for a Washington update. And thank you again for joining us.
Well, that's very generous of you. I thought I was going to my funeral there for just a minute. So thank you so much for inviting me, for the nice words from Jeff and Evan and Mark and Bradley, you as well. And Jeff mentioned my walk across the state. That was a remarkable experience for me. 1,000 miles, 6 months. I spent the night with 73 families in Murray County, Jeff. As you know, I stayed with Joe Lancaster. And or Jim. I stayed with Jim Lancaster, Joe's brother. But that I thought I knew the state pretty well when I started, because I was a 7th generation Tennessean, but I learned much more then. Congratulations to the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce for your work to create an environment for growing good jobs. You mentioned the auto industry. I noticed the other day that General Motors is investing $2 billion in the Spring Hill plant. And I think that made me think back 40 years, 35 really in the case of Saturn. But that's probably been the biggest change in our state over the last 40 years. And credit for that goes to lots of different people, many of them governors, Democrat and Republican governors over a period of time. But in 1980, when Nissan announced it was coming, we really didn't have an auto industry in Tennessee. The Ford glass plant, a few things, but really not much of anything. Weren't making cars. And the auto industry was all up in the Midwest. And we were the 3rd poorest state based on family incomes, and a lot of our jobs were leaving. They were textile jobs, and they were going overseas. Plus, the economy was real bad. We forget that, things are bad today in many ways, but back then the mortgage rates were 17%, interest rates were 11 or 12%. So that's where we were 40 years ago. And the arrival of Nissan put a stamp of approval on Tennessee as a place to build cars and trucks in the center of the country. Reminded everybody we had a right to work law, and everybody north of us didn't. It began to remind people that we had a good, stable state government that would create an environment, and it reminded Tennesseans that we can be first at something, because every state wanted that, and that was the largest Japanese investment outside of Japan ever. And then when General Motors put the Saturn plant here in 1985, that was the largest, they said, industrial investment in the United States up to that time, and everybody wanted the Saturn plant. So that really lifted Tennessee up. And what I really learned from that, I remember asking the General Motors folks, how do you locate your suppliers? Because I could count, and I could tell that even though a few thousand jobs in Smyrna and a few thousand jobs in Spring Hill was a lot of jobs, that in the whole picture, that wasn't many jobs. The jobs would be with the suppliers. They said that we locate our plants according to intersections of good 4-lane highways, because we want just-in-time delivery. And we didn't have very good highways. So we had 3 big road programs. Governor Porter had a 4th. Governor Haslam had another one. But by 1991, the truckers were saying that we had the best 4-lane highway system in the country. And we did that with 0 debt. I like to remind my Republican legislator friends that every single Republican legislator voted to raise the gas tax to pay for those roads instead of borrow money to do it. And as a result, every year the money goes not for interest on the debt or to pay the principal back, but to build the roads. And so what do we have today? General Motors, the General Motors plant in Spring Hill is the largest General Motors plant in the world. And the Nissan plant was, and I think still is, the most efficient and largest plant in North America. But more important, we've got nearly 1,000 suppliers in virtually every county in Tennessee, and nothing has done more to raise our standard of living than that. So I've been very lucky to serve during this time, and I think our state's been lucky that we've had a succession of leaders. I mentioned the other governors. There have been a lot of them that came after me, but we've worked together. We've handed things off to each other. We've been of different parties. We tried to create an environment that kept the 0 debt, that kept the taxes low, that kept the right to work law, that had a good environment, that business leaders could count on as they look to the future. A little later this morning, I'm talking to the TVA board. I think we sometimes take for granted what a terrific asset TVA is. It was 35 years ago when the auto industry began to arrive. It is today. Look at California. Their rates are going through the roof. They are they're having rolling electricity blackouts because they're relying on solar panels and windmills, and they're closing nuclear plants, so they don't have any electricity. And what they do have that is reliable is very, very expensive. On the other hand, TVA is lowering its rates during this COVID. They haven't been raising rates. They have among the lowest rates in the country. They're dealing with their pension, dealing with their debt, providing what they need to provide, and that's one more good asset for Tennessee's business environment. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might want to have. We've had a Supreme Court nomination last night. It's very important. Working on COVID every day, as you can imagine, as all of you are. But what I should really be saying is I thank you for the privilege of serving Tennessee in so many different ways. It's been a real joy. You know, I get up every morning thinking I might be able to do something to help make the state or country a little better. Go to bed most nights thinking I have. I suggest to my friends, look at Washington, D.C. as a split screen television. On one hand, you see all the tweets and the controversy and the confirmation hearings, but on the other hand, you have the Great American Outdoors Act, you have Fixing No Child Left Behind, you have restructuring Chickamauga Lock, you have the new Oak Ridge Institute at the University of Tennessee. You have a lot of things happening that are good for the people, and it's been very satisfying to be here. So I thank you for that privilege, and I'd be glad to take any questions or comments you have.
Well, thank you, Senator. We have some questions. I'm Ryan King with the Chamber's Government Affairs Department. We've actually got several questions that have come in unsolicited through email, so that's been great before the meeting. Although anyone can type questions into the chat window if you'd like to get those asked if we have time. We want to be respectful of the senator's time this morning. You mentioned it, Senator. So I'll ask this question first. Given the confirmation of Judge Barrett last night, congratulations on that. There are reported efforts by some to begin a current study to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts as to the potential for success of those efforts, assuming a President Biden is elected?
Well, I think there are a number of people who want to try that. What they want to do is expand. First, they want to admit Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. That'd be 4 more Democratic senators. Then they want to expand the Supreme Court and try to do that way what they couldn't get done through the regular process. I don't think that'll work. If it were to work, I think there'd be such a reaction in the country that the Democrats would lose elections for the next 10 years. President Roosevelt tried that at the height of his power in the late 1930s, and the American people revolted against it. Justice Ginsburg said before she died, it seemed like 9 was the right number. Look, courts are not supposed to make policy. That's what Judge Barrett said she believed. It's what Justice Scalia said. And that's why constitutional judges sometimes surprise the presidents who appointed them. Judge Barrett may be a conservative, but according to her view of the law, she will interpret the law based upon how the Congress passes it. And if we pass a law that produces a result she doesn't like, then I would expect her to rule in a case with a result she doesn't like. So I don't think it'll happen, although I do know that Joe Biden will be under enormous pressure from Elizabeth Warren and a whole variety of people to do just that if he's elected.
Thanks, Senator. And we're making some assumptions here, dangerous assumptions with that and this next question also. But what are your thoughts on the likelihood of a President Biden being able to unravel the individual and business tax reforms, such as the tax rate cuts coupled with tax base expansions, which were signed into law by President Trump?
Well, if President Biden is elected, the chances of his doing that with the support of the Democratic Congress are about 100%. And the reason is that taxes can be changed with 51 votes in the Senate. So you don't have a filibuster, or you don't have a requirement that you have to get 60 votes to change the tax laws. That's really how Republicans were able to pass them, and that's how Democrats would be able to undo them. And Biden's already promised to do that. Now, I wouldn't count on his being elected. In 2016, I didn't think Trump had any chance whatsoever of being elected, and of course he was. And if you look at the polls this morning, the race is tighter than it was last week. So I think we don't know what's going to happen in a week, but I think we do know that pretty good bet that if it makes a difference to you whether your taxes are higher or lower, you can pretty well count on them being a lot higher if President Biden is elected, because he said so.
Thank you, Senator. I'm kind of combining 2 questions here, so if you're listening in the audience, you can track that. And it is, do you believe there will be another COVID-19 relief bill passed? If so, what do you think it will look like, and will it include liability protections?
Well, the answer is, I think there should be another COVID bill. I think it should look like the one that Republicans have proposed and voted. 52 of 53 of us voted for it twice, including this past week and then about 4 weeks ago. It had in it provisions that the Democratic House had already passed that were almost identical. For example, $105 billion to help schools and colleges open safely. $15 billion in the Senate, 7 in the House to help childcare centers open safely. Money for testing, vaccines, and treatment. Also, a new version of the PPP loans, which is targeted more to businesses that actually lost money, and which simplifies and makes more flexible the forgiveness provisions in the loans, 100,000 or so loans already out there in Tennessee. So all that adds up to about $500 billion, which in my book is a lot of money. And I don't see why we don't start with that, since we already agree on it. The reason we haven't passed it is because the Democratic House has said, well, if we can't do everything, we don't do anything. And the Democratic House provision does not have the liability provision in it that the Republican provision has in the Senate. So Senator McConnell has said there won't be a COVID-19 bill unless it has a liability provision in it. So if I had to bet, I'd say there probably will be something in the lame duck after the election, that it probably will include liability. But you're wise in Tennessee to pass your own liability law and not count on this crowd up here to do it.
I think that same conversation was had in the halls of the legislature here back in August.
Well, actually, Ryan, it's a state responsibility anyway. I mean, the federal government's not supposed to be writing tort law. That's supposed to be a state responsibility. So the state should do it, and the state should do it and do it properly.
Thank you, Senator. And we've talked around this question already quite a bit, so you may want to move on to the next one. But what public policy or other concerns do you believe the business community should have on its radar in the near future?
Well, in Tennessee, I think, it reminds me of the story about Bear Bryant when he recruited this kicker from California to go down to Alabama and play football, and the kid was kicking at 70 yards every kick, and Bryant didn't say a word to him. Finally, the kid came over to him and said, "Coach, I came all the way from California to Alabama to play football for you, and you've never said a word to me." And Bryant said, "Son, when you kick it less than 70 yards, I'll remind you of what you were doing when you did kick it 70 yards. So I think the business community's guide for the future ought to be to take a good look at what's happened in the last 40 years and do more of it. I mean, the good business environment, the civility between parties whenever they change in the state government, the low taxes, the fully funded pensions, the zero debt for highways, the pursuit of Tennessee as a good manufacturing auto state, all those things are for the future. And of course, they'll be different. I mean, General Motors' $2 billion is for electric cars, and Volkswagen's building electric cars, and Nissan was out in front of everybody in building electric cars. So that means that the 800 or 900 suppliers around the state will be shifting to different kinds of cars. So I would focus on continuing to create that kind of environment. And then I suppose the two other quick things would be, one, transportation. Nashville's getting into trouble because it's getting too congested. And that's going to give an advantage to Chattanooga and Knoxville and places where it's less congested. So, and there's no need to wait for Washington to do that. I mean, when we passed our highway bill, it was like one tank of gas a year to do everything we needed to do in the state. And most people would be glad to pay for a gas tax as 1 gallon of gas, 1 tank of gas a year, in order to cut their drive from Williamson County into Nashville by 20 minutes. Or from Murfreesboro into Nashville by 20 minutes. So transportation is an issue. And then third, I think, is as the state's growing so much, remember what made it a good place to live. I remember when Saturn came, we were blowing and rolling and going, and that's when we started the Tennessee Homecoming, to celebrate the values of Tennessee, the music of Tennessee, the religious values of Tennessee, the courtesies that people show each other. All of that is what people really like about our state, the natural beauty, keeping the air clean and the roads clean. A Chamber of Commerce ought to spend a lot of time helping keep the state livable, as well as a good place to grow jobs. That's really the way you grow jobs, is make it a nice place to live and work.
And last question, Senator, when you look at our nation's legislative system, I think this is a question all of us would love to answer to. When you look at our nation's legislative system, what are some of the things that give you the most hope looking forward?
that what gives me the most hope is the talent of the men and women who are in the United States Senate where I work. I mean, we have Rhodes Scholars, governors, turnaround CEOs. We have we have, Mitt Romney ran an entire Olympics. We have really talented people here in the Senate. Uh, what doesn't work as well, and we need a change in behavior to do it, is to create an environment where we can get some more things done that are important. Now, we're able to get a lot more done. I mentioned earlier the split screen television, where on one side are the tweets and the controversy, and on the other side are the things that are done. But just in the last few years, and Bradley mentioned some of those at the beginning. I mean, when we fixed No Child Left Behind and got rid of the Common Core mandate, that affected 50 million students. 21st Century Cures has to do with the medical miracles getting into the doctor's offices more rapidly, and enormous help in the ability to create vaccines and treatments for COVID. The Songwriters Bill that you mentioned, the Great Americans Outdoors Act, which passed this year, all that passed in the midst of all the hullabaloo that goes on up here. So it's perfectly capable. This system is a remarkable system that we have. It needs more good men and women involved in it, running for office and supporting good people running for office. There's many ways to improve it, but I'm very hopeful about our future. What we have to do is learn to live in this internet democracy we got. Napoleon had a rule of not answering a letter for 30 days. Abraham Lincoln had a rule of whenever he wrote a hot letter, he would put it in a drawer and maybe never send it. Today, if you have a hot idea, you put it out in 1 second and the whole world knows it. And that affects our political environment, the way we elect people and the way we govern. We've got to learn how to deal with that. It's a fairly recent phenomenon. The iPhone came in 2008, not very long ago, but we've got to learn how to deal with that.
Well, Senator, I know you've got a hard stop around 9 o'clock, and we really want to thank you so much for your service. I think in a lot of ways you're right. Tennessee, we've gotten spoiled sometimes. We have such great elected officials. We have a good, strong legislature, that set a great precedent overall for our state. So again, we appreciate your service. You will be missed, but certainly not forgotten. So on behalf of the Tennessee Chamber, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, I want to thank Vanderbilt University for their support of this event. And stay tuned for future events, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you, Senator.